All right, here's your week 8 review video. I'm just going to go through each problem. As you can see, I already have them all answered. So just fast forward to what you need and then try to listen to the explanation that I'm going to give for each problem. So question 1. All right, so this is asking us to find the equation. So obviously before we can find the equation, we need to remember what formats our equations come in. And the two answers there, we have x minus h squared. All right, we've got this one. And then we also have y minus k squared. Notice that these are very much the same. The things that you need to remember really for yourself, if it's x squared, that means I'm either opening up or down. If it's y squared, I'm going to be opening to the left or to the right. And the 4p, this area 4p right here, that's what will tell us if we're going to go up or down. If it's negative, it's going to go down or left. If it's positive, up or right. And remember, p, we're going to see is the distance here. So the first thing I did on this problem was I just plotted the information they gave us. And then I found my vertex. So let me point. I found my vertex right here by counting halfway in between those two things. All right, so to write my equation, I need to know my vertex. That's the most important thing. And then I also need to know this p-value, which is how far apart the vertex is from the focus or from the directrix. So my vertex, if I name that, I'm going to get negative 2, 4. And you can see in my equation I've used opposite values down here. And then my p-value is 2. And if you look back at the equation, so refer back to your equation here, my p-value is supposed to be 4 times p. So if I do 4 times 2, I'm going to get 8. And the reason that's negative is because it's opening down. The only other thing you want to note is this is x squared. So remember, because it's opening down, up or down, that's going to be an x squared equation. So that's what I've got for number 1. Let's move on to number 2. All right, to be able to answer number 2, we need to fix this equation so that we have some more information from it. So I'm going to reorganize my things. Remember, make those signs opposite if you move things across the equal sign. I'm going to complete this square. So I'm going to do half of negative 2 is 1 squared. And remember, I have to add that to the other side. So I'm going to get 12x plus 24. You may need to pause and rewatch that section. And then in the video that I posted that you all kind of watched in class today, remember, there's supposed to be something you can take out here. So I'm going to have y minus 1 squared equals 12 plus 2. And here is my equation that gives me all the information I'm going to need. The things that it's going to tell me. So first, right here, this is going to tell me my vertex is at negative 2, 1. Pay attention to which one's x and which one's y. And then right there, normally that is 4p, which means p, so 4p equals 12. So p is going to equal 3. All right, and it helps me. It's going to help me to actually graph this information and figure out what that's telling me. So my vertex is at negative 2, 1. My p-value is 3, and since this is a y squared equation, I know that this is going to open to the right. So looking something like this. And to find my focus and my directrix, I'm just going to count 3 in each direction. So here's my focus. My directrix is 3 back this way. Oh, I'm running out of room. All right, so now you should be able to see where I'm getting those true, false values from. Hopefully that explanation helps you there. On to number 3. All right, number 3. Okay, just like with the others, what helps me the most on number 3 is thinking about a graph. So the first thing that I did here was I plotted my information. And then I tried to find the vertex. So if we look halfway between, my vertex is going to be here at 0, 4. And I know we're going to open to the left. That means I'm going to have a negative somewhere. And because it's left, this is going to somehow have a y squared in it, which all of my answers do. So that doesn't really help me out very much. Also, this is 2 away right here. And remember, this value is supposed to be 4p. So that's 4 times 2. That's where the 8 is coming from in these equations. So because this is x and y, when I look at my equation, all right, so focus right here. When I look at my equation, when I have y, the 4, I know that that's going to have to be c because 4 is going to have to be with the y value. So definitely not b. And a, the issue is that this negative 8 needs to be on this other side with the x. Remember, you really need to remember those basic formulas, or you're not going to be able to write any of these equations. All right, on this one, when it says use a graphing calculator, what they're wanting us to do is obviously to graph these two things, and to do that in our calculator, we know we need y equals, so I'm just going to show you real quick how we can get these into y equals form. So y squared equals negative 8x plus 12. To undo squared, we're going to square root, which is going to give us two equations. One is going to be the square root of negative 8x plus 12, and the other one is going to be the negative square root of negative 8x plus 12. All right, so when I go to put things in my calculator, I'm going to have to type in both of these equations to get that first curve. And then on the second side of things, we're going to have this other equation, x plus y. If I solve that, that's going to be y equals negative x plus 3. And you should just be able to graph all of these at the same time. And remember, in your calculator, you've got in the trace option, so it's second calc. And then if you go to intersect, that's what you're looking at. That's what you're looking for, is trying to figure out where those points cross, or those lines cross. Number 5 is pretty easy. It's asking for intersection in exactly 2 points. So if you just take each of these lines and graph them, you're just trying to figure out, is it going to cross twice? This one obviously only crosses once, so it's a no. And that's all I'm doing for all of these, is graphing each individual line. For these two, D and E at the bottom, remember to graph those. You probably need to fix them into y equals so that you can do slope, rise over run. All right, number 6, it says solve graphically. This one says using your calculator, and actually because it gives you a graph, it's easier just to do it by hand. Because these are both squared, I know that this is a circle. I can find my center here, which is going to be at 2, negative 3. And my radius, remember that's r squared, so my radius is going to be 6, which is how I got the circle you see below. And then I rewrote this so that I could get y equals. So that's all I'm doing right now. Y equals 1/2 x plus 4. So I just started at 4, rise over run, and you can see those don't intersect at all, which is where I'm getting no solution. Okay, and number 7 down here is a monster of a problem. It's not too bad, but these are the ones that you all are getting a little more confused on, I think. The biggest formula you need to remember here is ax squared plus bx plus c equals y. And we're going to use that to set up our matrix. Remember, I've got x and y on each one of these ordered pairs. And each ordered pair is going to give us an equation. So if I set this up, I'm going to have a negative 2 squared plus b negative 2 plus c equals 7. Those negative 2's and the 7 are all coming from that ordered pair. That's going to give me the equation 4a minus 2b plus c equals 7. Similarly, I can do the same thing for the next equation and for the last equation. And now we've got ourselves a system of equations that we can use matrix in our calculator to solve. So when you do that, your calculator is going to spit out an answer that looks like, which is going to give us our A, our B, and our C value. And if you go back and look at the answer, so here, if we follow and we look at the final answer, you can see those are the coefficients for our final equation. And all I'm doing is plugging that into the one you had to memorize. I hope that makes a little bit of sense. All right, number 8 is just something you need to have memorized. That was from our notes when we talked about it. And really the idea is just to remember here, 0 equals 0. If this is the last row of your calculator, that's true, so it's infinite solutions. If 0 equals 1 is on the last row of your calculator, that's no solution, because Obviously, that's not true. Number 9, that's all in your calculator. You're literally just typing that in, and I think that you should be okay there. Number 10, this is kind of like an extra credit question, so I'm going to come back to this at the end of the video, so just be aware. This is not like the most important, but we will talk about it at the very end. Number 11. So to be able to write this in the correct form, we're going to have to reorder that, which I think you all know. Okay, so I've reordered it, and now I'm going to complete the square 2 different times. So take half x plus 2 squared. Because I'm adding a number, I need to make sure I add 4. On this other one, I'm going to do the same thing. Take half y plus 3 squared. Since I'm adding a number, 3 squared is 9. And if I put all of that back together, adding these things, right, that's going to give me this final equation that I had written as the answer. From that, I think it should be pretty easy for you to see that the center is at -2, -3. The radius is at 3. And for 14, I just took that information and plotted it on the graph, counting the radius up, down, left, and right. Remember, the radius is in the equation is r squared, so I had to take the square root to get 3. Last one on circles and on this page. This time they don't give me the radius, but obviously I need it to be able to write the equation. You should see from the center, I was able to automatically jump down and write most of the equation. The 45 is the part that we need to figure out. And I think I told you that the easiest thing to do, or what I do instead of doing the distance formula, is I'm doing Pythagorean theorem. So I look first at my x's and figure out those are 3 apart, so I'm going to do 3 squared. My y's are 6 apart, so that's plus 6 squared. And that's going to equal, normally it would be a squared plus b squared equals c squared. This is equals r squared because we're talking about a circle. And then if I just simplify that, I'm going to have 9 plus 36, which in the end is going to give me 45 equals r squared. Obviously where I'm getting that from. And then the radius, like I said before, is the square root of that. So it's the square root of 45. You are welcome to write that as a decimal. I just have no idea what that is without a calculator. On to page 3. During class, you all seem to do pretty well with this whole sprinkler example. I think actually you probably even got everything correct. Make sure that you're answering that it's what's not being watered, so the things that aren't going to get hit. The question that I heard the most was about the whole inequality and maybe this symbol to write down here. And we're saying less than because a sprinkler you want to be inside. So just maybe if you need to make a note to yourself, you're welcome to. That inside, if you're looking for inside, that's going to be less than or equal to, and outside is going to be greater than. Just keep that in mind. Okay, we're almost done. Let's finish up real quick. So this last one is just talking, or one of these last ones is just talking about transformations. You really are going to have to just memorize those transformations with your gestures. So here's some quick things to remember. Inside is the opposite, and it's going to affect our x direction and our x coordinates. Outside is the same. It's going to affect our y coordinates. Adding and subtracting is going to move our graph up, down, left, or right, and multiplying and dividing is either going to stretch our graph in some direction or it's going to squish it together in some direction. So for this specific one, if I apply those rules, you can obviously see it's going to move right 3 up 2. When we talk about calculating, so this is maybe going to be a question on your test tomorrow. When you talk about calculating, if you go right 3, that means you're going to add 3 to the x, and if you go up 2, you're going to add 2 to the y. And by doing that, I get these new coordinates, and graphing is going to give me this new graph. Okay, so looking here, this is the same thing except we're going in the other direction. They've given us a graph and they want us to write the equation. And I'm actually noticing that there's an error right here, so hopefully you're watching this part of the video. I know that normally my center starts at 0, 0, and originally I wrote that it moved right, but it also needs to go up 1. That is something that I missed, right? This point has moved right 3 and up 1. Also, I'm noticing that usually these points are 1 space apart in the vertical and the horizontal direction. So like normally I should go over 1 and up 1, but here instead of going over 1, I'm only going over a half. So that's going to be compression because it's squished together, horizontal because we're talking about the x direction that's closer in the x direction that it should be, of a half. And then if we go to write our equation, remember the right 3 I think is easy for you all, -3, y'all got that. The up 1, that's the error that I had. I forgot to write +1 out here. The horizontal compression of 1/2, that part might be just a little bit tricky for you. So this horizontal compression that I've got going on here, because it's on the inside, because it's affecting the x-axis, it needs to be the opposite. So even though we know it's a half smaller, we're going to put a 2 there because we know it needs to be the opposite of what we think. So this right here is going to be my final equation for that graph. And the last one, woohoo! All right, our last equation here, they give us the equation and they're just asking us to simply check off everything that applies. So inside are my x-axis. So if you'll note, like I automatically crossed out anything that had to do with vertical because I know this 3 on the inside has to do with my x-axis. Also because it's inside, it's opposite. So instead of getting 3 larger, it's a compression by a factor of 1/3. The +1, translation up 1 unit, that's my +1 right here. So that's where that's coming from. -2 is the opposite, so that's going to be my right 2 units. Hopefully you got all of those correct. I think that you should have. Make sure you go back and study your formulas for tonight and knowing all of your different transformations. That's what's going to make you the most successful tomorrow. Here's our last little formula page. If you need to take a second to copy any of those down, make sure you know all of those and what they all mean for tomorrow. All right, here's number 10 as promised. I'm just showing you this so that you have seen it once before. Don't stress about it if you don't understand. This is not the most important question on this test. All right, Miss Williams is a year younger than her husband, Robert. So that means Miss Williams is her husband's age -1. Robert is 20 years older than their dog, Bella. Robert is their dog, Bella's age, plus 20. The sum of their ages is 63. Miss Williams plus Robert plus Bella equals 63. How old is each member of the family? This right here is a system, so what we're trying to do is set it up so that we can use a matrix to solve it. Our last equation is already in a good format. W plus R plus B equals 63. That's kind of the format that we want. So what we need to do is reorganize these other ones so that they equal, like our first one we want here to equal -1 and then equal 20, right? Those are the constant values in each of those equations. So I'm going to take a second to reorganize those. And as you can see, these are my equations. You may notice that the first 2 equations are missing a variable, so you may want to write in spacers. This has 0b in it. This has 0w in it. Now you have everything set up so that you could write a matrix, right? I can use this whole section right here to write myself a matrix that would look like, and then I would just use my calculator to get the final answer, which if you pay attention to our order will be that Miss Williams is 27, her husband is 28, and their dog is 8 years old. There you go. Hope that helps.